Good morning. Hi, Maureen. How are you today?
Good morning, Sarka. How are you? Well, I'm fine. Still here, not blown away anyway with
Oh
any snow.
no, I know. I'm very interested to see who has experienced the wrath of Francis over the last couple of hours. I see people popping into the chat already. Hi, Seamus. Hi, Catherine. Good morning. Looking forward to this session. Great, Catherine. Great to have you here. Let me see who else we have with us this morning. Alison, Linda, Anya, Laura, Elizabeth, Sean, Leona, Louise, Catherine, Usha, Dara, Darren, Seamus, Ray, Susan, Mike, Catherine, Sandra, Vivian, and Regina. Good morning to everybody. Great to have you here. I see some people popping into the chat already. Hi, Kathleen and Elizabeth and Mike and Usha and Seamus and Catherine again. Great to see you all here. Tell us where you are from around the country and let us know if anybody has been experiencing some difficulties posed by Storm Francis. I hope we haven't. I know it can affect people's connectivity as the weather is blamed for everything in this country, from Wi-Fi to loaves of bread. So let's see. Linda, I see you popping into the chat there as well. We're going to give everybody a couple of minutes, so we'll kick off at 3 minutes past 10. But good morning, Maureen. It's great to have you here today. Delighted.
Delighted to be here. Thanks, Sarka, for inviting me on. So, yes, looking forward to the morning session.
It's going to be really good, and I know we've got a lot of interested people on the call today. Laura is in Castlebar, County Mayo. Okay, we've got representation in the west of Ireland. Fantastic. Have we got anyone in the South Midlands or up north? I know we have. We had one of the islands off the coast of Donegal last week, which was fantastic. Let's see, we've got 28 people in the room. We've got quite a good crowd here this morning, so let's see who's popping in there. Sunniva, County Loud. Oh, Sunniva, great to see you here today. Hope all is well. I suppose presenting with PowerPoints, Maureen, is becoming nearly a necessary skill for every role at this stage, isn't it?
It is. I suppose a lot of people, PowerPoint gets a very bad name, very bad press, and there's the laughing about the death about PowerPoint and so on.
Yeah.
But as I'll be going through this morning, PowerPoint is a tool, and any tool is as good as the person who's using it and how they use it. And it's using it carefully and using it appropriately and only using it when needed. And that's one of the things that I'll be touching on this morning as well. Yeah. So since we have all moved our lives so much more online, I suppose people are using PowerPoint more. But again, it is taking a look to see how do you, if you're breaking connection with people, if you're using PowerPoint when it's not needed, then you're going to be a small, your face is a small little face in the corner of a screen rather than having that connection with people. So it's thinking about it very carefully before you decide if you want to use it at all or not. And that'll be the starting point from where I'm going this morning.
I know, and I won't give away, anything of your presentation, but I'll keep my mouth zipped until the questions and answers as well, because for me, this is also very interesting because I use PowerPoint all the time or presentations, and it's interesting. And I feel so privileged to be in this position because I get to talk to and be part of all of these upskilling workshops. And I am going to be like a whiz by the end of December. All of them. So it's fantastic. I see Sandra's popped in there. She's from Cork. Hi, Sandra in Cork. And Deirdre Kildare, great to see you. Listen, we're at 4 minutes past 10. I will kick off. So good morning, everybody. My name is Sorka Finucane. I am the owner and founder of Trained-In. We are absolutely delighted to be hosting the Taste for Success SkillNet upskilling workshops. We are running 60 workshops between now and the 18th of December, which is 3 a week and a fourth one every third week. Our topics are ranging from everything from Excel last week, a bit of PowerPoint presenting and presentations this week, customer service tomorrow, managing remote teams on Thursday, and then next week we have a whole different plethora of courses. So if anybody's interested in signing up to our mailing list where you can get added to our timetables, let me know and we can organise that for you. A little bit of housekeeping before we kick off. We can't see you and we can't hear you, so a lot of people will be delighted to know that. Please use the chat facility and make use of Maureen's time here. I'm just putting up a poll there, and this poll is going to give Maureen a bit of a gauge on who we have on the call this morning, and I suppose how to gauge or aim her presentation. So if you all just draw your attention to the poll, there's 3 questions there. How often do you use PowerPoint? Once a month or less, 4 times per month or less, or more than 4 times per month? And Maureen, tell us a little bit about what you're going to take us through today.
So it's a taster. Well, let's keep with the theme of the taste for success, Sorcha, as we're going through this and the pinch of PowerPoint. And it's just going through really, if you choose to use PowerPoint with your presentation, and if it's a decision that you make that you're going to use it, how can you use it best to enhance what you're saying and what the words are that you're using. So it's how it can have the best impact to add to your presentation. A lot of people, when they hear the word presentation, assume it means PowerPoint. And the 2 words almost get interchanged. So for the purpose of this, if we think of presentation as being what it is that you're saying, what the words are that you're using, and then the PowerPoint is the visual aid that is used to enhance that.
That makes perfect sense. Let's have a look at the results of the poll. So we have 65% of people say they use PowerPoint once a month or less. 11% of people use it 4 times per month or less, and 23% use it 4 times, more than 4 times per month. So that's probably a good gauge, and it's not really surprising, I think, because I suppose the people who don't use it as often are ones who want more tips on it and how to best use it. I'm just going to start another poll, and then we will allow Maureen to start it off straight away. So the next poll is, when you're creating a presentation, do you create slides first, plan content first, or work on content and slides together? And I think this is a really important question, and I'm very interested to see the answers of this one, like you are as well, Maureen, I'm sure.
Exactly. So for this one, again, we're thinking of presentation as being the overall, you're delivering a presentation at a meeting or an event, and what way do you set out doing that? And the results coming in are pretty much, there's a good mix of what's there for between B and C at the moment. Which is interesting, because a number of clients that I'm working with would, when it comes to delivering a presentation, power up the laptop, do the slides first, and then head into doing the rest of the presentation. But from the people that are on the call this morning, we don't have anybody who is saying that they create their slides first, and it's pretty evenly mixed between B and C there. So that's good to see, the planning, the content, and we'll take a look at those who are in C about working on the content and slides together. But it's a good indicator. Thanks everybody for taking part in that.
I'm surprised at that, actually, myself. I thought a lot of people would say that they create slides first, because that's what I found myself. Even senior people who use this all the time for presentations, they create their slides first, and then it's so time consuming.
It is, and it means that you're trying to work what you want to say around your slides, rather than having the slides as something that's going to enhance your content. And you will find sometimes as well with organizations that people would share slide decks between them. So, you know, I've got a presentation coming up, and I say, Sorcha, can you give me that slide deck that you used last week, and I'll use that one. And so it's not even your own material, and it just makes it more difficult, because when it's not yours, not your content, you're trying to fit your content around someone else's slides, their thought processes. So it's always worth doing your own slides. But that's great to have that information. And we'll have a question in chat now in a few moments as well for everybody, just to see where things are going.
I'm just moving your presentation back to the start, Maureen, because we were flicking through it earlier on. So instead of up live. But don't forget now, if anybody has any questions coming through at any point, pop your question into the chat. If I find that it's vitally important to interject at that particular point, I will. Otherwise, I will leave all questions and answers to the end of Maureen's presentation. So Maureen, I'm going to share this with you now. I'm going to hand over to you. I'll turn my camera off. So it's all okay. Here you go.
That's great. Thank you. So I'm going to stop that for a moment. And just some of you might have heard of Sir Ken Robinson, who passed away last Friday. And if you haven't heard of him, he was an education expert. And in 2006, he gave a TED talk, which was called "Do Schools Kill Creativity?" And it is one of the most viewed TED talks of all time. It's got over 65 million views. And if you haven't seen it yet, you should look it up. You can find it on YouTube. And in that talk, he delivers a really strong message. And for 18 minutes, he has the audience in the palm of his hand. And there's no PowerPoint. It's just him, and it's a message, and it's delivered with stories, and it's delivered with humor. If you've ever seen any of Steve Jobs' presentations when he was, a new Apple product and he was launching it, and he was an exceptional presenter. And Steve Jobs said that people who know what they're talking about don't need PowerPoint. And when you look at any of those Apple presentations, you can see that the focus is always on Steve Jobs, what he's saying, rather than the slides. The slides are there as the backdrop, if you like, which is how it should be. So today we're going to be going through some basic tips and techniques that can help you enhance your presentations. And we've already had a look through the information from the polls there, so we have an idea of who's on the call and the level of use that you would get from PowerPoint when you're doing your presentations. So you might have noticed that the name of this particular presentation today is A Pinch of PowerPoint. And the reason for that, Sorika suggested to me that I might like to keep the culinary theme going with regard to the Taste for Success SkillNet. But I chose the word pinch carefully, because if we're looking at an ingredients list and you've got a pinch of something, it means that it's a small amount. It's a small quantity of, you're adding a pinch of salt or sugar or spice, and it is going to add flavor to your meal. It's not the main component. It's not there to overpower or overwhelm the meal. It is something that's going to add extra to it. And it's the exact same with PowerPoint. It's not the main part of your presentation. You are actually the main part of your presentation. PowerPoint is there to add that flavor. It's there to help the audience better remember or better understand what it is that you're saying. So if we have a chat at the moment, if you can just put in, what are the biggest challenges that you face when you are creating PowerPoint? So what challenges do you find the biggest when you're creating a PowerPoint presentation? And I'll get back to Sorika in a moment to see what's coming up, if there's any running theme coming through that. And the topics that we're going to be taking a look at today when we are going through the presentation. So as I said, the name of it there is Pinch of PowerPoint. We're looking at 3 areas of it, focusing on audience attention and animation. Now, when I work with clients, we have a full process that we go through when they're putting a presentation together. And audience is the very first thing that we look at. Who's going to be there? What information did they need to know? And so on. The slides, and this links into one of the poll questions that we did. The slides and putting slides together is the very last piece of that jigsaw when we're putting a presentation together. All of the groundwork is done beforehand. Or when I was preparing for today, I had all of my work done beforehand, and then I went back over my presentation to see, where can I put in a slide? Where would a slide be helpful? And the guideline, I suppose, all of the time is this slide going to help my audience better understand or better remember my presentation? And if it is, then it's worth putting it in. If it's there for notes for me, that's not where it belongs. I have notes on pages beside me here. If I need them, I can refer to them. I don't need notes up on the screen. And we'll be taking a look at that later when we're talking about the amount of content that we're putting into slides. So any common themes coming through there, Sorcha, from the chat with challenges that people face?
It's all more not overcooking it, controlling the time it will take to use the presentation, content in formats other than text boxes, getting the right graphics and the right structure to make it easy to read, altering slides from one client to another, putting the content in order. It seems to be a lot about content and the actual way the content is laid out.
Okay, so that will fit in with some of what I'm doing today, and feel free, as Sorcha mentioned earlier, if there are questions that you have as we're going along, pop them into the chat and we'll deal with that. One thing, seeing as I'm speaking about audience here, first of all, and somebody mentioned about altering the slides between one client and another. So what I would say there is, rather than assuming it's going to be the same deck of slides that you're going to be using between one person and another, each time you're starting with a new client, with a new audience, then you're going to be having a think about what presentation do they need, how can I make this relevant to them, and then it's, if you like, thinking about, are there any slides that I've done before that could be used exactly as they are, or do I need to tweak them? And if I need to tweak them, how do I tweak them so that they are relevant to this particular audience? So I could be delivering this exact same presentation, for example, to a different group tomorrow. We'll say it's a group of accountants that I'm delivering this to tomorrow. My pinch of PowerPoint isn't going to be as relevant. The reference to the culinary terms isn't going to be as relevant. So I might find that I'm going to change that slightly, tweak the title of it to something that is going to make sense to a different audience. So hopefully that is just something that you can think of and will help you as we're going through all of this. So as we said, the first thing that we're taking a look at here is the audience. And I have mentioned, you know, that you've got your structured process. So when you're putting your content together, you're thinking, am I going to be giving them information in what I say that's relevant to them? But also then from the slides point of view, is what I'm going to say going to be suitable for this audience? And suitability these days is accessibility. If we think before March of 2020, the vast majority of us, if we were looking at a slide presentation, we were all in the one room, facing the same direction, looking at the one screen. Whereas if we take it this morning, some of you could be looking at this on a desktop, could be a laptop, could be an iPad, could be a smartphone. And if I've got slides in front of me that's got lots of graphics and texts and, you know, intricate detail that's there, it may not necessarily be seen. So that's one of the things that you need to bear in mind when you're putting your slides together. What about the accessibility? Where are people going to be looking at this? And the next one then is about the readability of it. And that fits in again with where are they accessing it. But even if everybody was looking at this in the good old days, back on the screen together and you're all in one room, how easy is it to read? So the font size that I have used on this particular one here is size 90. If you take generally in a document, font size could be 11 or 12. It's recommended that no smaller than 32 for PowerPoint. You can see on this slide here, font size for 32, the middle one, no smaller than that. Now from my screen, that's looking quite small. The size 18 is looking tiny. If we have large font size, that's going to force us to think about what content we're putting onto the slide, because I can't have loads and loads of content if I'm using font size that's going to be big enough for people to be able to read it. So using a large font, that's one way to keep us in control, I suppose, of what we're actually putting onto the slide. So again, that font size for a large screen, 18 might be fine. 32 is probably no problem. On a phone, depending on what phone size it is, that could look very different. So it's part of the things to keep in mind when you are putting the slides together. Take a look at this here. Now, for starters, it pained me, I have to admit. This went against everything I believe in putting this slide together because there's far too much text on it. And I'm sure you have seen, and I have seen, slides that have far more text than that. Automatically, your eyes have probably been drawn towards that and you're reading it. And at this stage, hopefully you will have realized that it's pretty much what I'm after saying to you already that I've put onto this slide. There's a lot of detail in it, a lot of text, and regardless of what is there written on it, not your full attention. I was at an event recently, well, in person recently, and the person who was speaking had a slideshow. It was really interesting talk, and he had presentation slides, and somebody had obviously told him use pictures rather than text. So he had pictures up on the top right-hand corner of it and all of the text still on the slide. And at the beginning of each slide, he said, don't mind the text that's there now, just focus on the picture. Doesn't matter what he said, your eyes are always going to be drawn to the text. So you try to keep that text as minimum as possible. So if we're going back into the presentation that's here, one way that I could have reduced that, because some of you have mentioned about having difficulty maybe in reducing text. If I'm taking each of those 8 bullet points and I'm trying to just have one line per point, so I don't need full sentences. So let's just take a look at the top ones there on the before March 2020. Most presentations were in person at meetings and conferences. Reduce my words from that. What are the key points of that? Well, in-person presentations, that's my key words. So it's like that you've got your trigger words that are there that will help you to speak about them. So taking that same slide and reducing it, it immediately looks cleaner and it's sharper and it's easier for the audience to read. If we have a slide put up like the first one, I'm going back to it again, a slide like this one, then you don't need a presenter because the audience can just read what's there and they get the information. So the person who's doing the speaking is redundant. So there's no point in having them at all. So this one here, at least these are the reminders for the audience. They're the trigger words, if you like, for the person who's doing the presenting to help them to talk about each of the topics, and the same information is there. But if I were to do like what I had done in the first one, and use my visual, the same information is there. I'm going to have spoken about what things were like before March, talking about everybody in the same room and so on, and the visuals are there to keep the audience focused. That wasn't really difficult to remember or difficult to understand information in the previous 2 slides, so it didn't need to be put on a slide. So hopefully that makes sense from what I'm saying there, to have a look at what your content is and see, do I actually need a slide for this at all? Can I put a picture there that's going to keep audience attention but allow me to speak on? Next thing that you're going to be thinking about then is the type of font. And I'm looking at 2 main bodies, 2 main headings of font type. The first group are called serif, this S-E-R-I-F, serif font. And those ones they've got little details, little legs on the bottom of them, like little ticks on the bottom of them. So if you take the T from the Times, for example, and rather than just being a straight across T, the line at the top isn't straight across, it's got the little bits at the end of it. So the problem with serif is that if there's quite a lot of it, it can be difficult to read. So it's fine for using as a heading, but in the body of your text, sorry, I went the wrong way on this one. And the body of your text, you are better off using the sans serif one. So you can generally find, and quite often when you're putting it together, you will see sans serif or serif beside them. Or you can do a Google search to look them up, or just keep with your basic font types that are there. So the likes of the Arial, the Lucida Sans, the Century Gothic, those ones, they're rounder, they're easier to read, and it makes it easier again for the audience to be able to access what it is that you're looking about. And the final part that we're looking at here is colour. If you're putting a presentation together, you might decide that you're going to use your brand colours, for example, but think about it carefully and test it in advance to see what does it look like. Because if we're using colour with maybe white or black font on the text, it can look very different depending on the colours that's there. So if you see each of these three examples, and just for your own information, the word contrast there is done in a size 60 font. So far bigger than the necessary font size for people to be able to read it carefully. And you can see the impact of the different black and the white against the colour backgrounds. Alternatively, you might decide that you want to use a white background and colour font on it. Again, how does it look? What way is that going to look for the person who's viewing this on their laptop or the iPad or the phone? How is it going to look? That font size, again, is size 60 from what's there. Have we any questions at this stage, Sorcha?
Maureen, there's no questions in there at the moment. No.
Okay.
I'm just looking through the chat. No questions at this point. I was interested to see though that font size is 60.
Yes.
Sorry, I put the camera on. It looks perfect on the screen, but I would have thought that it was a lot smaller than 60.
60.
So it's amazing. It's amazing how much you do have to pay so much attention to your font size and the contrast. I think your contrast examples were really good as well, because again, you have to put yourself in the position of the learner or the attendee, and what, apart from what looks good to you, what is legible, I suppose, for them. If anybody has any comments, please feel free to pop it.
And I have a question. I have a question for everybody there. If they pop into comments, and I'll get back to you, Sorcha, to find out. So, when you're watching, if you are watching somebody doing a PowerPoint presentation, what causes you to switch off or to lose attention during that presentation? So you can just get some feedback on some answers there on that. But you made a very good point there, Sorcha. What can look really well to us might not look well on a slide, and particularly if it is a graph that's got lots of detail in it. And graphs tend to have, if the detail has labels on it, that's really small, and you could be wasting your time because people can't see what it is. So it's really, if there's a graph that's going to be there, do not have it cluttered with lots of information. Pull it back bare minimum so that it's accessible. You're always thinking, what is going to be accessible to the audience? And that's your key part on that.
We have the comments coming in now.
Great.
So slides with just too much text and slides with just text. Hard to read colour, presenter just reading what's on the screen. Jargon. Too much information, tone of voice, too many texts and graphs, too many words, too much text which is read by the presenter, on a face-to-face presenter just reading slides, too long on a particular point on a slide, a reading of a presentation. I know there's rules, or not rules, but there's suggestions around how much time you should spend on one slide and all those kind of
that depends on the slide itself. But if you notice here from today, I'm dipping in and out, and again, particularly if this is for an online presentation, if you are having a long point, there's no need to have a slide on the background. The next slide that we have there is the one with attention. It's the next body of it. So rather than having that and people looking at that, it's better if you're able to build up the connection with the audience as much as possible. So dip out of the slides. If that's in a real life situation, blank your slides. If you press the letter B on your laptop, then your screen behind you will go blank. And that means that if you're dealing with an audience question or you're giving an example of something and you don't actually need the slides behind you, get rid of them. Because again, people's eyes and their focus will be drawn to the visual rather than to you. So if you want full attention, then you're the person in control. So get that attention. So get rid of the slides. So here it's dropping out of the presentation and then going back into it when it's needed. And in a live situation, press the button B on your laptop, get rid of the slides, talk about what you need, and then when the slides are there, they will have much more impact if you're using them when they're needed. With regard to the content that people were talking about, you see there, if you're consciously having your font size large, that's making you think about, how can I reduce this? Do I need the text at all? And if I do, how can I reduce it to a minimum? And if you don't have the text there, then you can't be reading it. And it means that, and a lot of clients, when I start working with them, are it's like the security blanket that's there. They really want to have all of the words on the slides. But ironically, when they let go of the words on the slides, it gives them so much more freedom, because it means you don't need to be remembering what you want to say. You can talk around the topic. It's your topic, you know it. You don't need to memorize something. And it just makes it easier, and it gives you that bit more freedom as well.
Yeah, I totally agree with that.
When we're talking about attention there and how to keep people's attention, and people have mentioned about the text, and images are always going to be good. Picture paints 1,000 words. We've heard it again and again. So when you're using images, where do you use them? How can you use them? Well, when you're on, and going very briefly into this, but when you are putting your slides together, beside the home tab there, you're going to have the tab with pictures. And if you click on that little arrow, the next thing that's going to bring you to is the option from this device or from online pictures. Remember that you might have a photograph yourself that's going to be very relevant and suitable that you're going to be able to use. So maybe you've got your own pictures. If you're using online pictures, your next choice when you click on that is that you can go into, sorry, I moved too fast, that from the slide there, insert pictures, it could be from OneDrive or it could be from Bing Images. And that's a handy way to get your images. Be careful, particularly in a public setting, that the images that you use have a Common Creative license. So taking images directly from Google Images, usually you don't have the copyright over those, or you're not allowed to use those. People do it all the time, but strictly speaking, you're not supposed to. So keep on, when you go on to Bing, it's Commons Creative, I think is the phrase that's used. That means that you have permission to use those. So use those ones rather than going to Google. Similarly, you can go onto online sites. So 3 that I would use a lot: Pexels, Pixabay, and Unsplash. And they have, you put into the search bar at the top what image it is that you're looking for. So if you want somebody who's looking confused, you put in confused and variations of that, and you get different images, and you can choose one of those, and you know that you're doing it without breaching copyright on anybody. So images are always a good way to keep people's attention. Another way is to vary the slides. And I have the same text on 2 different slides here. You might have noticed in the background that my slides are slightly different. There are variations between them, but there's the consistency throughout. So if you look at the background of this particular slide here where the blue is, the next slide, it's following the same pattern. It doesn't look particularly different, but there's slight variations throughout. That will help to keep the audience attention as well. You need consistency. So if I had the various slides up at the top in one, down the bottom in another, and they're all over the place, that's going to cause a little bit of annoyance from an audience. They might not even be aware of it, but subconsciously they're sort of like, this isn't fitting. Whereas if you take between these 2 slides here, the consistency is there, but you still have the variation between them. And that's another way that you can help to keep the audience attention as things are going along. The next one with regard to animations, we have another poll there. If we can launch that, please, Sorka.
I'll do that now. So the next poll is live there now, and it's called, do you use animations and transitions in your slides? Sorry, turn my camera on. Yes, no, or I don't know how to use them. This would be an interesting one as well. PowerPoint is such a useful tool if you know all the ins and outs on it. And I just want to make one comment here. Maureen is here to tell us about putting together a PowerPoint presentation and not necessarily the how to use PowerPoint. So We have another session coming up on that, which I'll tell you about later on. So just let's see what we have. So our results are yes, 32%, no, 20%, 48% of people don't know how to use them. Great.
Don't know how to use them. Okay. Great. So I spent a couple of minutes on this just to take a look at it. I'll go back into my slides. It can be very useful to use animations as a way to add variety and interest. The danger is when you go overboard. So you really need to keep it very simple, because you don't want, again, the audience having things bouncing in from one side and opening up and all sorts of different gimmicky ways of doing animations. So it can be very effective, but keep it simple. For those of you who aren't familiar with it, again, on the toolbar at the very top, so you see here that you've got your home page and you've got your insert and so on. Over here, I've got transitions. I'll be taking a look at that in a moment. And the next one is animations. And when I click on animations, this is what opens up. And I've got a range of different animation styles. Now, play around with them. See what you like, but I'm going to be recommending what ones are probably the least intrusive in a moment. But so if I was working on this as a slide, I have my animations here and I have this graph, and I want to bring this graph in as an animation. What I would do is literally click on the image and then highlight in the toolbar which of these particular effects I want to use. Now, keeping it very simple, you're just taking a look at the ones that are along here, the star ones. Over on the right hand side, you have animation pane. You can go in and have your animations timed and so on. I keep it really, really simple, and I would recommend just keeping it very straightforward when you're doing this at the moment, but play around with it. So if you are bringing in, if it's a case that you do have to have bodies of text. So if you remember back to when I was showing the text, the pre-March 2020 and the after March 2020, and I might want to just bring in one body of text first, speak about that, and then bring in the next body of text. Animation would be a good way to do that. So I could have inserted a text block, have my two separate lots of text, and then animate each block separately, or it could be bringing in each point. Somebody had mentioned earlier about spending a lot of time speaking about one particular point. So if I've got 3 points coming up on a slide, but I need to speak 2 or 3 sentences about each one, rather than having the whole lot of information there for people, first off, because they're going to have it read, I want to control how they get that information. So I'm going to highlight each point and animate each one so that I bring it in one at a time. And it means that people are only seeing what I want them to see when I want them to see it. So that's your animations slide. Transitions are slightly different in that, for the animations, the 3 that would be recommended there as being the least intrusive or sort of jumping all around the place: appear, fade, and float. They're nice and gentle. They're not going to sort of be annoying for the person who's watching it, remembering our audience. The next one is transitions, and transitions is the way that your slide moves from one to the other. So it's almost as if it blends in from one slide to the other. And again, to do those up at the top on your toolbar at the top, we're looking at transitions, and you've got different ways that they can transition. So you might see one of the more dramatic ones is almost like it's on a stage and the curtains open up to reveal the text that's behind it. Now that might work if it's one slide, but if you've got that going for 20 slides, it can get quite annoying. So again, you want to have it as simple and straightforward as possible. For this one, when you've got your slides together, the whole lot of them done, over on the very far left-hand side, I can't demonstrate it here, unfortunately, you're going to click on all slides and choose one transition type. And it means then, as you're using your mouse to move on, that rather than it being a little bit jerky between each slide, that it's nice and smooth. Again, trial and error, test it out and see what works for you. the transitions, once you choose a transition, it's going to be the same transition all the way through. And the best ones there are probably the cut, the fade, or the push. The push is the one that has the effect that it's pushing it up from, that the slide comes up from the bottom, pushes the other ones up out to the top of the screen. But they're a nice way to add a little bit of polish to your presentation when you're doing those. What is really important is that you are consistent with the slides all of the way through. So there are different levers of consistency, if you like, so that you've got the same text all the way through, so that the font is going to be the same, that you're not chopping and changing between different font styles. Choose what it's going to be. Two styles can work well. One style in the heading and then a different style in the body. And if you remember back when I was talking about the serif, like your Times New Roman, it's a little bit more difficult to read, but that would work fine in a heading because it's going to be bigger. Whereas the sans serif one, that's better in your body. That the shapes that you're using are going to be consistent. If you've got images like what I have in the background of mine, that's sort of the curve image, that's consistent all the way through. If you've got any lines being done, it could be that you've got a line for a header or footer, again, consistency on that, and that your graphics are going to be consistent. So if you're using images that you have them sized so that they're similar size from one slide to another, could be that they're in similar location from one slide to another. And the good way to find out what your deck looks like at the end is at the top of your toolbar, where you've got your view, you have Slide Master. And so we'll see it here. So again, I've got all of the transitions were there, my animations, we had spoken about inserting an image, moving over here to slideshow when I want to actually run it as a slideshow, but view. When I go down here to view, normal is the normal way that you're going to be looking at it. But if I click on this one here called Slide Sorter, that's going to give me the overview of what all of my slides look like. And I can see at a glance if I've got a slide where the font is different, or the picture is in a different place, or the heading is wrong. I can see exactly the way my slides will look. I've got my full overview of them. And it means very quickly I can go back and say, oh, I need to change slide 6, the text is off, or whatever it's going to be. So it's a good way to find out how my overall slides look. So again, that there is under view and under slide sorter. And it's a good way of working through those. So in summary of what we're after having today, we looked at 3 parts. We looked first of all at the audience, and from the audience point of view, we were thinking about accessibility. Where are they going to be viewing this? It could be on a phone, so they might only have something very small that's there to access it. What about the readability? Think about what your font style is going to be, what your font size is going to be, and if you're using color for the text, be aware of color background, what's going to work well, and if it's on a white background, your color text, how's that going to look? So that was first of all for the audience. Secondly, we're talking about attention. So how do we keep the audience attention? That we are going to use images where possible, and we took a look at different places where you can access those images. Could be your own images, could be through Bing if you're using directly from the slides, or you might use one of the 3 sites I mentioned, Pexels, Pixabay and Unsplash. And then that you've got variety in the slides as well, so that it keeps things going and it keeps the audience interested. And then our third part then, we were talking about animation. And if you're choosing to use animation, keep it simple. Don't have things bouncing in left, right and center, and have consistency in what it is that you are putting up, so that it flows nicely for the audience and that it's going to be a positive experience for them.
Maureen, before you
yes.
go on there, can I just ask you one question? Is that font size on that particular slide the 60 and the 90, is it?
Yeah.
That's just one question. I just wanted to ask you before.
So I'm going into my own slide deck there. Which slide
That
do you
one where
know?
you were just on the 1, 2, and 3.
Okay, I'm gone into my own slide deck here just to see on that. And for that, it was 56.
56. Okay, great.
For the 3 headings was 56, and for the white writing was 52.
Okay, perfect. Sorry.
I just go back onto that again so that people can see. So the black was 56 and the white was 52.
Brilliant. And Sue has just said that she's watching on her phone and her laptop, and it's perfect on both.
Okay. Oh, that's brilliant. Thanks for that feedback. That's good to know. Yes.
Great.
And I suppose that the one thing to take away, if you take one thing away from today, it's don't always assume that you're going to have slides. They might not be needed. I was working with a client recently, and she was very anxious about her slides. But she was delivering a talk that was in the health and well-being space, and she was delivering it it was a webinar that she was delivering, and it was for to staff in Google. I said, but it's not going to make sense to have slides at all. It made far more sense that she was going to connect with them. She was doing some practical exercises, relaxation. Slides would have actually broken that connection that she was having with the people that were there. So first and foremost, do you need them?
Yeah. And I know the first webinar you did at me, Maureen, you didn't use slides at all.
That's right.
One of the rules I know is that if you can articulate your point without using a visual aid, you don't need a slide.
Yeah, that is it. Yeah. Does it help your audience to better understand or better remember what it is that you're saying? Now, sometimes, obviously, you're going to need a graph, you're going to need something that's there, but always think about how much of this is actually needed. Can I simplify it? Do I need all the detail that's there? Will they be able to read it? And if it's a case that you need loads and loads of information, well, then that shouldn't go on a slide. Maybe what you could do is have extra information in a separate handout if it's in a live scenario, or a separate email that you're sending out, that you've got a document with further information that's on that. Put the information there.
Brilliant. Okay, back to you, Maureen.
So sorry for taking my drink of water. My throat has gone dry. So that was the end of my presentation there from the summary slide that I had. And so it's just if anybody has any questions, then from that we can take those.
Stu, that's great. Thank you very much for your input on that. Does anybody else have any questions at all in terms of what we've gone through there? I think it was very informative. I have one question, Maureen, that you mentioned using the B key to hide your slide. Is that like just pressing the letter B while you're in a full screen presentation?
So yes, when you're doing a presentation, so if you're doing a presentation and it's been projector up onto the screen, so you're in presentation and you're in presentation mode. So if you want to just blank off what's there, press the B screen. Similarly, if you're using a presentation clicker, a lot of the clickers actually have one of the buttons. The presentation clicker that I have has 4 buttons, and it's moving it backwards, forwards, but the one on the bottom is to actually blank the screen.
Interesting. That's
very
useful.
And because it's far away.
Bring it back.
Yeah. Sorry for cutting across there. I think the internet is causing trouble. But yeah, if you want to get the audience attention, you knock off the slides and you've got everybody's attention in the room straight away because they're wondering what's happening.
What's going on? Yeah. And you just press the B button to get the presentation back up again?
Back up again, yeah.
Perfect. There was a couple of people asking that. The B button is great. It's the best button to keep attention on an audience. Brilliant. And some thank yous coming in there as well. Fantastic. I think that was amazing, Maureen. I've definitely got some tips. I've written down 90, 32, and 18. Thank you. And just for anybody else, I know some people had asked about showing how to use the animations itself. Sorry, Dara's just asked, would you recommend a summary slide at the end during Q&As or any questions slide?
You can use an any questions slide. I would, okay, if you have a summary slide up behind you, then you can be guaranteed that people's attention is going to be on that. So if you're running tight on time and you want to say, okay, I'm putting the summary slide up here, and then if anybody's any questions, but what I would suggest much better, the last thing the audience remember is going to be what you're saying. So if you want to have questions as your second last part of your presentation. So for example, we're going to be going through this presentation today. I'm going to be taking questions for 5 minutes, and then I'm going to summarize all of the key points at the end. That means the last thing the audience hear is you with you in your area of expertise, where you're giving your knowledge, rather than somebody who's asking a question that, for example, if somebody asks you a question, you say, I don't have the answer to that, I'll have to get back to you on it. That's really not the way you want your audience to remember you.
Yeah.
You want to be remembered as the expert. So keep in control of that. So I hope that that answers the question there. I saw one question on the side, and I know there are a few coming in. Somebody asked a question about how do you get back into the presentation? So if it's a case, so from Webinar Jam that was here this morning, when we were going through the run through yesterday, always go through a run through of the platform that you're using. So I was able to see how I was able to stop the presentation and then get back into it smoothly. Zoom is used by a lot of people. If you're using Zoom, you can try this yourself by setting up, just starting a meeting. Start a meeting and then share your screen. And when you start sharing your screen, get out of that, stop sharing. And when you go back in to start sharing, it will pick up from whatever slide you had left on. And I hope that makes sense. It's very difficult to talk these things through rather than to demonstrate. But definitely go in and practice. And that's a given. Always practice the technology that you're going to be using. I have used Google Meets for doing presentations as well. And it's quite clunky. I find it quite clunky to get out of the slides and then back into them. So be familiar with the technology. Any other questions there, Sorcha?
Just people are asking about the replays, so everyone will receive a link to watch the replay in about 2 hours. Perfect. Sorry, Jared. Endless presentations where questions are the sign off due to time running over. Yeah. No more questions really. I'm just looking at Catherine. Lots of thank yous coming in from Vivian and Catherine and Sue and Ray, and that seems to be it. I've just popped a little note in there to everybody. For anybody who wants the training on how to use PowerPoint in terms of creating, using functions, using the different features like animations and transitions. We have an amazing trainer coming back to us on the 6th, 7th and 8th of October, Kelly. So anyone who was with me last week, we did amazing 3 days of Excel training last week, which was fantastic. So if anybody wants to get notified or added to that list, just pop me an email, sorcha@training.ie. If anybody is looking for more training with Maureen or would like to do some more, pop me an email. Or if you're with a company and would like to get Maureen in, Skillnet are going to fund training. So contact Brita at info@tasteforsuccess.ie. I'm just going to pop it into the chat there.
And while you're doing that, I have to acknowledge Mike's reference to the pinch. He said the pinch leaves a nice taste. Thanks for that, Mike. I like that. But my effort at the beginning didn't go astray, so that's great.
Perfect. I also don't forget to fill out your learner profiles, which are also included in the emails. I think that's it. I've no more questions popping in, Maureen.
Great.
We're finished just before time, which is fantastic. Thank you very much for your time today. Really appreciate it. I think everybody on the call took something beneficial away from your presentation. It was really, really good and enjoyable. And you definitely kept us interested. I will say thank you to everybody on the call for your time, and we will leave it there for today. Hopefully we'll see you tomorrow. Tomorrow we have Mark Thornton, who is going to be delivering a presentation on customer care, its importance on increasing profits. So I'm going to pop a link into register for that just into the chat there now. So if anyone would like to register, you can do so there, or pop me an email and we'll sort that out. Maureen, thank you very much for your time. It was
Thanks, Rebecca.
And take care. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks everybody for participating as well. It's great. Thank you. Right.